Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the HerStory Online Summit. What day are we on today, Ruth?
5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Day 5.
Day 5 of our
Oh, not
online
too
summit.
bad.
Welcome back, everybody. It's good to be here this morning with you. We are going to have another action packed day with amazing speakers from all over the world. But we are going to start at home this time with our
Yes.
own project in
Mm-hmm.
Mazivisa Primary School in Shurugwi. So Ruth and I have been working together for the past, 15, 17 years. I can't even remember when we first met. And the Africa Thrive project is based in Mazivisa in the Shurugwi district of Zimbabwe. One of the things that we were trying to do is to restore a little primary school that has 350 children, and water was a major issue for us and still is in most parts of Zimbabwe. So, Ruth, you want to talk a little bit about the importance of water and what we've managed to do?
Yes. So Mazisa, the people had no nearby source of water. So they used to travel about 10 kilometers,
Yeah.
10 to 15 kilometers to go and fetch water. And so it included the children and the women mostly. As we all know, in Africa, it's the women that do the work. So the women who would carry the buckets on their heads, walk the 10 kilometers or 15 kilometers, fetch water, and then a return journey. So they were doing 20 to 30 kilometers a day just to get water. And you can imagine that they couldn't carry much because you're only using your head, and the children too are helping, but also they can't they couldn't carry much. So it was one of the areas that we looked at that needed development, and the village needed assistance in, because it's a basic water is a basic need. So what then we did is we found a drilling company, and we asked them to come and scout for water during the 10 days that we were working on the school and other things that we were working on when we were in the village on one of the visits.
So,
And they
Ruth,
came.
as you
Yes.
know, they say a picture tells a thousand
Yes.
words.
Oh, please. I thought you were running
We
the pictures as
collated,
you were
no, no, we
talking.
collated some pictures and we will share with you the video of the
Yes.
water project and we'll talk to it as it plays out.
All
All
right.
right, so here we go. This is our first video. Okay, now you can continue where you left off.
Okay. So we had to bring in the drilling rig. We obviously had to contract a drilling company to come and do the scouting for the water. And you can imagine the excitement. So, one of the things that we Africans are well known for is we are very communal, in the sense that if something is happening in the area or in your neighborhood, we come together and we just bond as a family. So this day was very special. So the drillers came in the morning, and we were, I think there's a picture where we are just standing around and waiting for that water to come out of the ground. But
It's
I remember also that day, as we were waiting for the water, we had games with the kids. Do you remember? Where we
Yes, yeah, it
said
was an
them.
exciting day because
Yes.
the whole community came,
Mhm.
and these pictures are actually showing two separate projects. One was us drilling water at our home, And the other
Mm-hmm.
one was at drilling water at the actual
At the
school that
school.
we're supporting
Yeah.
as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole community came together, and water is life no matter where you are in the world.
True. Especially clean water. Mm.
Yeah. So the team, we had to prepare prior to them coming, and created a platform where we could put a 500-liter
Tank.
um, tank so that
Mm-hmm.
we have some gravity and be able to push that water out with gravity into the water pipes. So
Yes.
that was something else that took quite a lot of creativity, especially when you're
Mm.
in an environment where you don't have a forklift. But
Yes.
the team that we hired were very, very skilled. They did an amazing job.
And they
Uh,
knew what they were doing.
Once
Yeah.
the pump was the borehole was drilled, we got a
Uh-huh.
submersible water
Ah.
pump, which is what you can see being installed there now.
Mm-hmm.
And this water pump is powered with solar power. So again, we're
Yes.
trying to draw on the natural resources that we have. There's lots of sunlight in Zimbabwe, as you know. That's my ex-husband and a nephew and a whole team
Yes.
of people getting the submersible water pump into the borehole itself so we can start pumping the water out through pipes.
Mm-hmm.
It
So
was
again, you can
an
see people
experience.
coming together and working.
And that's the thing that's quite fascinating about working in Africa. We are very communal in our way of being.
Mm-hmm.
When there's work that needs to be done, people will come and support you with no expectation of any payment. They can see that the water will benefit them as well. So, in fact,
Yes.
these two boreholes are now servicing a very large area. Like I was saying, there they are now pulling the
The
tank
tank.
up on top of the water. They had some cords, I guess you call it string. I don't know what you can call it, but you can actually see the sun is setting. It took quite
Mhm.
a while to get it right and be able to pull it up on top of that the pedestal that was built so that we can have the force of gravity pumping the water out into
Hmm.
our tanks. And then finally they got it on top.
Can you believe it? Without a pulley, without a crane.
Yeah, that was just a handful of men who put up their hands to come and support us with this particular exercise. But what's really fun about this whole project is we were able to start growing vegetables. We were able to
Hmm.
start growing fruit trees. Mangoes grow very naturally in our region. So we are going to be starting a mango plantation around this water. And there's the community now celebrating when the water finally
Yes.
started pumping. We're pumping water into that big barrel you see there. My
Hmm.
sister-in-law, teachers from the school came. The village headmen were there to celebrate and support the efforts that we were having. Now, just to go back to the importance of water, the last time I was giving a presentation in the United Nations, I go to the UN every year when things are normal. Last time I went was in 2018. And I was sharing the story of how we've now got water in our community and that we wanted to start a mango plantation because mangoes grow very naturally in our region. And I met with an environmentalist who advised that if we plant the trees according to the United Nations bylaws, so they have to be planted a certain distance apart, the
Hmm.
plantation has to be audited once a year, we can earn carbon credits. So people are getting paid money to offset the carbon emission in Western countries. So our community can actually earn money by planting trees. It's not only going to help us financially, but it also helps restore the environment. We can even
Mhm.
start planting the kind of trees that grow fast for firewood and energy, because deforestation is a big issue in Africa, as you know. People are
Yes.
relying a lot on trees to generate the heat that they need for their cooking, and our forests are starting to disappear. Do you want to add anything there, Ruth?
And I think the issue of planting trees and that project that the UN will fund or finance or support is I think one of the things that we are doing currently in this country now is if you cut down a tree, then you need to plant two new trees. So definitely reforesting the forest or reforesting the land, and just making sure that there is enough trees to sustain oxygen needs, and obviously keep the carbon um, levels down.
Yes. This is now when we
Yes.
were putting the borehole
Yes.
at the school.
Uh-huh.
So all the school kids came on that particular day. We had our local chief with us. The whole community came. It was a real celebration when we
It
finally
was.
raised funds to install a borehole at Mazivisa Primary School in Zimbabwe.
Do
And
you
just to go,
remember? Do you
Mhm.
remember why we made the kids sit that way? Oh, the picture is gone.
It'll come back. There's another one a bit later.
Okay.
You can remind us when we get to that one. You'll see it. It'll come up very soon. So stop me when I'm talking.
All
Um,
right.
so this is our headmaster. The man to my right, or my left,
Mm-hmm.
is Mr. Chikwata.
Chikwata.
And he has been with us for the past 13 years. The other
Yes.
issue in Zimbabwe is that we are losing our teachers. Most
Mm-hmm.
teachers are making more money working as domestic servants in South Africa than working as a professional teacher in Zimbabwe. This is Chief Mazivisa and his wife,
Mm-hmm.
and we have been working with him hand in hand, getting things done in very creative ways. We
Yes.
started to find that we were getting pushback politically in Zimbabwe. We were being accused of starting a political party because every
Mm-hmm.
time we go to Zimbabwe, we get the community together at the school, and it's illegal to have a public gathering without a government permit in most communities in Zimbabwe. So, the way we managed to change this is by working with our local chief. He is the one who calls these meetings because he has the mandate
Mm-hmm.
to do it. And we are in the background, really, doing our thing without any agenda. Ruth and I
Yes.
decided at some point that it didn't matter. We weren't there to get credit for what we were doing. We're just there
Yeah.
to help and facilitate to bring about change. And it's actually given power back to our local chief. So, Ruth, that's the picture you wanted to talk to.
Yes. So in Africa, if one of the things that we do to show the Ubuntu, to show the oneness, is we'll make the kids sit in a circle, or we make the people sit in a circle like this. Oh, there is me. With their feet like this. So then it forms a circle, but then we'll have somebody sit in the middle. And so she was telling the story. Gertrude was the storyteller for the day. That's why she was sitting in the middle, and she was just telling kids so many stories. Yeah,
And the
interesting.
sign we're holding up there is a
What did he
young
say?
woman from, I met her in Dubai,
Mm-hmm.
and she was a flight attendant. She came to a workshop that I was running, and she
Mm-hmm.
donated free air tickets to me that year. You remember, Ruth?
Yes, I do.
So most flight attendants can add a family member so that families can travel. And
Mhm.
she decided to gift me free air tickets that whole year. I went to Zimbabwe for free. and she
Yeah.
sponsored my travel, which was really quite fantastic. This young woman was one of our first Zimbabwean speakers. You remember she read a poem
Ye- Yes.
during
And
this event?
she presented you with flowers, with thank you flowers.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah. I
wonder
was
where
really touched. It
she
was a
must be now
wonderful
in high school,
celebration.
hey?
She'll probably be in high school by now.
Mm.
So we've got Ndidza joining us here on Facebook. Thank you so much. It is great to see the happy kids. And yes, that sitting in a circle does mean oneness. That's
Oneness,
exactly
yeah.
what Ruth was talking about. The
Mm.
children are holding two laptops. You can see in this picture. One of the things we've
Yes.
been doing is we get donations from people in New Zealand and Australia, and we're always trying to equip our teachers with laptops. So those were two laptops that came from New Zealand, donated to our teachers at Mazivisa Primary.
These people get excitement.
Excitement.
So that was the celebration. Something as simple as
Water.
water can
Water.
completely transform a whole community. Selena, welcome, welcome, welcome to this
Yes,
morning.
welcome. Good morning, good evening.
Good
Good
evening.
evening. Wonderful to have you with us again. So we were just sharing the Mazivisa Primary School project
Okay.
when we installed water both at our home and at Mazivisa Primary School.
Mm.
Okay.
So now our mission is to start building this community from the grassroots level up. Other
Mm.
good news I have, Ruth, is the investors I met with yesterday are willing to take on the whole village. They're going to help us raise funds to rebuild the school, to build a clinic, to build a library, and to start a training center so that the community can be trained with different skills to generate money. We're also going to go back to what we had already started with the making of the bricks for this
Yes.
project. We'll be giving people microloans to buy the cement and supply the school with bricks so that we can
Wow.
have employment throughout this whole project as well.
Wow.
So
Oh, thank
I'm really
you.
excited about that.
Yeah.
So that
That's
is our
exciting.
Mazivisa Primary School project. We'll be sharing more short videos like this in the
Yes.
next 5 days of the work we've done already in Zimbabwe, both at Mazivisa Primary and also at
Mustard.
Mustard Seed Orphanage in Bulawayo. So we
Mm.
have been supporting two projects in this
Yeah.
way. So without
Wow.
further ado, let's introduce our first speaker for the day. You
Yes.
have her bio, Ruth, and I will line up the video.
Sure. Um, so also like to welcome those that are joining us on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for joining us on this event, on this our sixth day. So our first speaker is
Oh,
Karen.
actually, Ruth,
Yes.
before you introduce the next speaker, let me just give a few testimonials from people who have come and have supported us in Zimbabwe. I have two short videos. I hope they'll play. I'm George Arts, and I'm from Australia, and this is my second visit to Zimbabwe. I have no children of my own, but I feel that these are my adopted children. So I've got 280 adopted children, and I love them all very much. And I hope to have a very long association with this school, the Mazivisa Primary School. And the idea is to help these children to achieve a good education, so that hopefully they will be able to go on to further education to complete their secondary school and also to university. That would be my goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So George Arts is based in Australia. He has been an avid supporter for the HerStory movement, for Mazivisa Primary School and Africa Thrive. He's come
Mm.
to Zimbabwe with us twice already.
Twice. Mhm.
So, George, we love you. Thank you for your
Yes,
support.
he's such a darling.
Another short video here is from William.
Bill, yeah.
And I'm from Japan, and I'm right
Wow.
now in Zimbabwe at a beautiful school with so many beautiful children. And I came here because I wrote a book and I wanted to use the book funds to help the school, and we did. We bought paint and school materials and so many things for the kids to use this year. And we also taught a little bit of English this morning to the kinder kids. And we painted the outside of the school a bit.
Wow.
So it was a wonderful experience for me. I would say this is the top 5 experiences of my lifetime.
Wow.
Sorry to go.
Wow.
So that is William. He's based in Japan. He has his own early childhood schools in Japan
Mhm.
teaching English. And he has done a lot to help our community as well. He comes with us to Zimbabwe. He helps the children, teaching them English. So we've had some great supporters
Yes.
Mm.
in the past that we really
And
have to thank.
we are very grateful to each and every one of them that have reached out and contributed to our cause.
Mm.
Fantastic. Okay, now you can introduce the first speaker, Ruth.
All right. So our first speaker is Karen M. Calucci, who is a New York, New Jersey-based licensed psychotherapist and professional coach, specializing in helping people through the unexpected. Since losing her fiance suddenly on September 11th, she has been working on strengthening her own resilience, both personally and professionally, through writing, speaking, and connecting with others. In addition to a BA in Human Resources and an MSW from New York University's School of Social Work, she holds certificates in training and organizational development and adult psychoanalytic psychotherapy. Karen currently serves as a student advisor and lecturer at Columbia University School of Social Work. When she isn't supporting clients, students, or employees, Karen enjoys a passion for comedy, dance, good food, and travel. And you can find her at www.karencalucci.com. We'll run the website at the bottom as she's speaking. So, ladies and gentlemen, our first speaker, Karen Calucci. Thank you, Gertrude.
Thank you so much for the introduction and for having me. My name is Karen Carlucci, and I am based in New York and New Jersey. And I am a licensed therapist and certified professional coach. I'm 48 years old, and I've had my own journey, as we all have in this life. And personally, I was very deeply affected by something that was a collective shared tragic event, and that is September 11th. And in my case, I'm one of many stories, of course. I lost my fiance at the time, and that left me in a place of utter confusion, unexpected turmoil, emotional upheaval, and also professional disruption. I really got off track. And my story is really about how to find something within us that can move us forward without feeling like we are abandoning the past and somehow integrating loss with growth. So, as a therapist, I pull from my own education and training and experience. And for the first time, many years ago, I had to somehow make sense of something beyond my comprehension and find a way to help myself. And I needed help. That was the reality. And it took some time, but I moved through it. And at this point, the last several years, I've really been focusing on reaching out to others, women in particular, who are suddenly finding themselves perhaps in a sudden, unexpected loss of sorts, that they're wondering, how am I supposed to move on? Where will I land? Is my life going to ever be good again? And the answer that I can say is it can, yes, be good again. It just won't be the same, but we are still very much who we were before, and we're becoming something more. So that's my message.
Wow. Yeah, 9/11 was felt all over the world. It was one of the world's worst disasters, really. I can't even begin to imagine, where you were at that time. Now, this is a few years on, and looking back, talked about talking to someone in the future who can guide you. If you were to go back to the younger you, that young woman who was in that position, totally devastated. I know that a lot of people now are in a similar situation. The COVID pandemic has hit every single corner of the globe, and we are all feeling it. I lost my mother-in-law on the 29th of March last year in Poland. 3 weeks later, my mother died in Zimbabwe. So both my husband and I have not managed to go back home to bury our mothers.
Oh,
So 2020 was a difficult year.
yes, yes.
Give us some advice. 3 steps, 3 things that one can do to make sense of all of this.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Gertrude, for those losses. It is something that there isn't a quick fix or a step-by-step answer in lifting the pain of loss. It demands time. It really requires that we feel it and let it wash over us. But that is frightening. That is not an easy thing for us to allow to happen. You had asked, what might I offer my younger self, which is really someone in the present who is experiencing loss and unresolved loss. I think that is really what adds to the complexity of it, where you can't actually influence the circumstances. And yes, you made a very nice parallel that with COVID-19 and all that the pandemic has placed upon us globally, as well as individually, that has really brought forward this sense of powerlessness. And we don't do well with that. So what I would say to my younger self, or to you or anyone who's relating in this struggle, is that time will deliver some ease. And you do have the tools to work through it, but also to accept. So accepting is hard. It feels like we're not doing anything. So I know back then, my instinct was to take action. I felt like, well, I have to do something. And once I let go of that impulse of thinking that I was going to be able to find him, for instance, which when you think about it, if you really, wrap the head around what happened that day, there was no finding him. There was no finding him. So to really have to accept, okay, there isn't something I can do, but I can take care of myself in very small ways and let other people also take care of me and be there for me. And it's easy to say, but it takes, I think, some self-compassion, patience, and tolerance, that if we practice it ahead of time, when and if we do confront these really tough, painful experiences, we will be more equipped.
Yeah, sometimes when you hear situations like this, the most frustrating thing for people to be able to help family, friends, relatives is not having the right words to say.
Yeah.
But what do you say to someone like you who had gone through that experience? I'm constantly asking myself this because I've got friends all over the world, and people are being affected in so many different ways. And I sometimes feel I don't have the right words to say to comfort them. Can you shine a bit of light on that?
Sure. And that is something we all relate to. Sometimes there are no words. And I find myself struggling, and I'm trained in such work. And I have to catch myself and just say, oh gosh, I don't have to find the perfect sentence. I can just be present if I'm physically with that person. Perhaps, if it's a certain relationship, touch their hand or give them a hug that they can just know I'm present with them in that physical moment. But in other ways, with verbal communication, we can say, I'm struggling to find the words, but I'm here for you. I think that's authentic.
It really is, because sometimes we try and fill the silence with words that don't mean anything.
Yeah.
And it becomes counterproductive to the person who's grieving, right?
It can feel, yes.
Mm.
It can feel that way. Yes.
Wow. So now if I can take you into your future, I know that you have managed to rebuild your life. Tell us a little bit about what has happened since.
Well, it was a long road. We're rebuilding even when we think we're not. Like literally, the minutes, hours, and days and weeks after September 11th, 2001, I might have felt frozen in time and as if everything stopped. But I was evolving in those moments. I was growing. I was developing into who I am in this moment. And that is something that happens every minute that we're present. We are becoming the next version of ourselves. And that's a pretty cool thing to realize. So I simply was letting myself flail around for a while. Took my time getting back to work. I was young enough where I was in a position to have some help from family as I got reset in figuring out where I was going to live and what I could handle with responsibility and how I wanted to spend my time, and taking some classes that made me feel that I could work through this process, such as, writing and other forms of expression was really good tools for me. And connecting with other women, I reached out to all types of significant others who lost someone that day, who were not actually married and were in this in between place, because that was unique. And I found myself being proactive and reaching out to connect. And that's how I got through it. And then after, I call it my decade of dating when it comes to that department, I literally was just not finding my way to another life partner. Some women found someone more readily and they were ready to go and they started a family within a few years. And I just didn't find that in the way that we might have thought it would go once upon a time. So that's an example of how my path did dramatically change. I'm aware of that, but I let it be what it was. I trusted that I was moving through this journey in the way that it needed to be. And then I eventually found my way after or around 40 years old in a relationship that did seem like it could stick and move into the future. And at 42, I got married. And it sometimes is a funny thing. I'll say, oh, I got married a second time, but I never got married the first time. It just felt like I was. It's a very bizarre experience, I have to say. It's like living in two different dimensions or universes. But that's the thing. They do come together. And you can almost have both in a strange way. So I was fortunate that my life with my current husband has really just been able to accept my past. And I'm fortunate that I have a connection with my fiance who of course was lost, with his family. And that brings us all together. So it's really, I think, an example of allowing it all to be part of your story.
That's awesome, because a lot of times people try and push the past away.
Yes.
And it's okay to have both. This is someone you loved. This is someone who was such a big part of your life. And whoever new is coming into your life should be accepting of that. So I'm really glad that you found that balance, because sometimes it's not that easy. Because people are trying to tell you to forget about the past, move on. But the past is still there, and it can still exist in a very balanced way, honoring and respecting those who have gone. So that's really beautiful to hear. I'm really glad that you found that. So let's just move forward now. I have learned that every day counts. You know, I have videos and pictures of the last time I was with my mother. I was fortunate. I went back to Africa. She was very ill at the time. I spent 4 months with her. And in those 4 months, it was almost as if I knew I was never going to see her again. Whenever she could walk down to the gate, I took pictures, I took videos. I was just looking back the other day, working on a book that I'm writing about my parents, because I lost my parents less than 2 years apart as well. And I took 3,000 photographs of my mother. I have like 250 short little videos of days when she was well and talking. And I keep saying to everybody that every minute counts when you're with your loved ones. You know, hug them like that's the last time you will put your arms around them.
Yeah.
And I think COVID has given us that gift, right? That gift of perspective that this life is so fleeting. And we think we've got control. We think we know what's coming. We don't. In a heartbeat, your whole life can change. And you're one of those people who experience that.
Yeah. And it is, what you're describing so well is a profound realization. It's sobering. And when you go through it, it's disorienting. But to know it, and the sooner we learn it, and to me, this is part of teaching children about resilience. It's all in that category of like, the sooner we learn that we can influence a lot, we can control certain things, but yet there is just one moment that's real, and that's the moment that we have right now. And then it's gone, and then there's the next one and the next one. And that's why I was saying we're not the same person moment to moment, because it's constantly shifting and moving. So to just realize that, and yes, this experience with the global pandemic has opened our eyes. And even with this realization, I think it's important to acknowledge that there is no way we could ever truly be 100% aware and prepared for the time when someone will leave us. It's just, it's almost like we can get close to preparing and appreciating and realizing that this is fleeting, but to also accept once again that when it does occur, however it goes, we're still going to feel like we were hit with a bulldozer.
Nothing quite prepares you for death. You're so right. You're so right. Karen, I do not have the words to thank you for coming online and sharing your story with us today. To everybody out there who's listening, please just remember that this life is fleeting. Our days are numbered. You don't know when that day is coming. So if you have a husband, if you have a wife, when they walk out the door to go to work, hug them like it's the last time you will meet them, because you never know. Put your family first, your community next. Let's all just remember that this crisis we're in globally is a shared experience. There isn't a single human being on the planet who hasn't been affected. So do pay attention to the people around you who are needing support as well. And for those of you who are grieving, I think this has been a brilliant example of resilience. You've given us so many tips on ways to cope. I have been journaling. I write letters to my parents. When I miss them, I just pull out my pen and paper And I've written some of the most beautiful letters, words that I would have wanted to have said and didn't get a chance to do that. And it gives me relief because I get all of those emotions out of my system and on paper.
Yeah.
So thank you, Karen.
You're very
Thank you so
welcome.
much.
Thank you.
Wow.
Wow.
Another amazing story. 9/11 was felt all over the world. We all were affected and impacted in some way. And I just love Karen's philosophy on life. You know, we live and like we'll live forever, but we don't. And it's
Mhm.
really in remembering that our days are numbered. You just don't know when you part company with a family member, a husband, a wife, a son, a daughter, if that's going to be the last time. That's what I got from her presentation. It really hit me quite hard because that was shortly after my mom had died. What's
Mm.
your take, Ruth?
For me, 9/11 is also very significant personally because it was the same week that my husband died. And so whenever 9/11 is talked about, it's just that whole week, and the memories and the sadness that comes with the losses that happened in New York or in the US at that time. And she talks about then withdrawing from life. Okay, so she then went out to date, but not with the intention of connecting with anyone. She was just dating because I think she was trying to get over her loss and everything. And yet she still had a relationship with his family. So she it sounds like this guy was really her soulmate.
Yeah.
um, and then how she's dealt with the grief and then the moving on. What a story, and yeah, but very sad. That time is very sad, and it's 20 years, eh? This year
Yeah.
is 20 years since 9/11.
It's
Wow.
amazing.
Mm.
Oh, Selena, what was your take?
Unfortunately, I had to go and give away my granddaughter. She was going, so I had part of
Okay.
it. So, he, it's like when you talk about the loved ones and spending time with them, because
Mm.
the time is valuable. I remember when I used to tell people to say, "Your mom, you'll never have another mom. You'll
Mm.
never have." So it's like if you have a mother, love her as if it's the last day of your life. And people used to laugh at me. And I say, guys, I'd lost my mom when I was very young. And I had her sisters around. They were not able to represent her.
Mm,
Even now, it's like my aunt phoned me today and say, okay, I love you, Selena. I miss you. But she's the one who akafika mabachang. But still,
Mm.
she doesn't feel that gap.
mm,
And it's like all the photos we had, or my mom and papa parents had, they were bent. The house where I don't know how it
um,
was. So I don't have a picture of my mom. I had one, I think, I don't know where it disappeared to. Her sisters or her brothers, they didn't have any. So it's like it's very valuable just to say, okay, she's so precious. I am with
Mm.
you, Gati, when you said I took 3,000 photos and videos of my own mom
Mm.
because that's very precious. You turn
yeah.
around, those you love, you always miss them. You
Yeah,
think,
I have to thank Ruth for those pictures because she had the camera and it was like she was just guided
mm,
to watch and document my mother's last days. Every step she took, Ruth was there with her phone. We have
Yeah,
some beautiful images.
mm,
it was an awesome time,
mm,
and yeah, actually, even before dad died, just those weeks and the days, and there were so many pictures. It's like we were out literally taking pictures of everything, even before the lobola, and then during
mm,
the lobola. After, it's just like we're documenting every moment with
mm,
with the parents. And yeah, so looking back and the videos, it's
I
awesome.
mean, it's not. I mean, it's like okay, my to my children, they don't even know my mother. They know the
Mm,
name. They know she was there. I
but
mean,
there are no pictures.
they've never no pictures. And I mean, today they surprised me. My son called me and said, "Mom, because wanted to build the graveyard for, I mean, to put the tombstone, whatever, for my mom and my dad." So my children and my nieces and nephews, they said they want to do that for their grandmothers and I mean the grandparents. So
Mm.
they phoned me and said, "Oh, we are ready. We will be ready by May. So tell your siblings that we are prepared to do it." It's like okay, that's the only thing they can do for them, but they didn't know them. But they
Mm,
know their mom, their dads, they come from somewhere, so they
yeah.
want to respect that. So it's really important. I mean, yeah, my son does that. Even when I was sick, some pictures he took, I mean, they're unbelievable. I would sometimes I think, oh, you took that one. He says, I didn't want to miss any moment.
Mm.
Mm.
So it's very crucial.
Well,
Thank you for
family,
sharing that.
the rest of the family would not always agree with it, but yeah, we all deal with our own. We have different relationships with our parents, actually. You know, when
Yeah.
I sit with my siblings and we talk about our parents, I realize, oh, so that was a different facet to my dad because he had a different relationship with any of my siblings and a different. So yeah,
Mm.
it's
Absolutely wonderful. So I'm going to introduce the next speaker. Like we are attracting men as well to the Her Story movement.
mhm.
And the next speaker is Kim Winter. I found Kim on LinkedIn through a weird series of little synchronicities, only to find out when I was interviewing him that he's actually from New Zealand, has lived in Australia, is now in Dubai, and has a project in Kenya and is
Wow.
married to a Kenyan woman. Absolutely fascinating man. Now, his bio gives us a bit of an insight of who he is. He is the top one, he's in the top 1% of logistics and chain supply influencers. He's a headhunter, a corporate advisor, and a trade facilitator. He helps businesses transform, and leadership and coaching and mentoring is something that he does as well. But what really attracted me to Kim is the fact that he created an organization called Oasis Africa while he was traveling in Kenya. He had the privilege of going to the largest slum in Kibera in Mombasa, in Nairobi. So we'll share Kim's video next.
Hey Gertrude, and thank you for that awesome entree. Really, all too much. But my name is Kim Winter. I'm the global CEO of a consulting firm called Logistics Executive Group. We have about a dozen offices around the world. I'm in Dubai today during COVID, been based up here, but also a resident, New Zealand citizen, resident of Australia, Hong Kong, and the United Arab Emirates. So that's where I am today, and so good to meet you.
Now, Kim, when I first met you, the reason why I said you're like a brother from another mother is because I found you in the most magical way. And there are so many threads and little synchronicities that have brought us together today. We bumped into each other on LinkedIn. And when I started looking at your bio, I realized that you have been operating in my part of the world. Oasis Africa absolutely blew me away. Let's go a little bit into your work in Africa. My first question is, what was the motivation? Why do you do what you do?
So Oasis Africa is a registered charity which is set up in under law in Australia, and it came around purely by happenstance and a complete coincidence. For our consulting firm, Logistics Executive Group, we do consulting and executive search in most parts of the world. And I happened to be in Kenya in 2004, as we've just been deployed for the tsunami in Sri Lanka, actually. And DHL and the World Health Organization positioned us in Kenya to help set up a disaster relief operation there and training for such. And an ex-partner of mine rang up and said, listen, you're 5 kilometres from one of the world's biggest slums in Nairobi, Kenya. You're sitting there drinking your pink gins, and there's a lot of people getting some bad treatment in the slum, children in particular. So I ended up going into the slum with some folks who had been working with and recruiting for, and found a bunch of kids who really needed some help with education. And that's where Oasis Africa started, freedom from poverty through education.
Absolutely amazing. Now, in a world full of go-getters, we are lacking go-givers. Why is giving so important for the future of humanity, do you think?
Yeah, I think you've got to have some sort of deeper thinking and meaning to your life than just being able to accumulate resources and possessions and finances. I was very fortunate to have been brought up in a working class, middle class family in Wellington, in New Zealand, where you now reside for the last 21 years. Early in my piece, my early days at university, I studied sociology. We're a very socialist society in New Zealand. My parents were very giving. We brought a lot of people into our home. We helped a lot of people in the community less fortunate. And myself and my brother both had that ethos. And when I was fortunate enough to be successful in starting a business like Logistics Executive Group, having been a serial entrepreneur in my earlier life, in Australia, I set up Logistics Executive Group, and we were pretty successful. But when I got into a situation where I found a lot of people with less fortunate situation in Kenya, as it happened, and the nasty things that were happening in this particular slum, 1 million people in 4 square miles in Kenya, the 5th largest slum in the world, and an opportunity to help and start a school there, which is what the request was, then the folks around me, my business partner, Daryl, and myself, set up Oasis Africa in the slums of Kibera in Nairobi.
Absolutely fascinating. So what changed your life when someone gave to you?
I just, it comes back to the childhood. We were always a family that felt that we could spare something for others, and we were never really materialistic. Again, I had a fortune at a young age of building a trucking company at the age of 18. So by the age of 30, I owned the cars and the houses and all of that. And to be honest, it really didn't excite me. I'd proven the fact that I could achieve in the capitalist world and all of that. But I just found the most motivating things working with others. I've always been creative and entrepreneurial, sometimes falling over and bruising my knees and breaking a few things, but learned the hard lessons in life. But always had this feeling that, there was plenty around for some, but not enough for most. And that's just been an endearing ethos that's been throughout my life. When I started a Logistics Executive Group in 99, we've employed over 4,000 people, put meals on the table for over 4,000 people over that period of time, 22 years later. A big part of what we do is helping others, helping startups, and in particular our work in Oasis Africa, where we've educated over 8,000 kids in the slums of Kenya through education and escaping poverty through that way has been just something that's really worked for us. We feel good about it, and it's something that's part of our culture.
Now, my grandmother used to say that this universe is like a giant bank, that we have to keep depositing good deeds because they do come back tenfold from very unexpected places. It's never really from the people you help. but
Yep.
opportunities, coincidences happen when you are a giver. Can you give us an example of that, or how your life went full circle from where you started to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this happens all the time. It's incredible. You don't have to be any great believer in any particular religion or spiritual area of belief from my perspective. I think you have to have a broader understanding of people and culture and their upbringing and their influences when they're younger and one thing and another. But what I have found is that even just recently, again, my business partner, Daryl Judd, is also a Kiwi, he's from Auckland, and myself were down in Kenya in business a few weeks ago. Fortunate again to be doing business in a place where we'd started something which had nothing to do with business. It was purely non-for-profit. And the kids that we'd helped get into primary school at the age of 8 to 10 were there was a bunch of them, because Oasis Africa is thriving down there with some great people who work with us down there on a non-for-profit basis. We had a whole bunch of kids who came and joined us, and I just saw the faces of kids that I'd seen 15 years earlier now graduating from university, and they all came out to greet us. And we'd had a pretty tough business trip up to that point, and meeting them on a railway line in the middle of Kibera slum, which is, one of the most inhospitable places of the world if you're not used to it, but one of the warmest places in the world if you know the spirit of the people there, who are very proud, although they have virtually nothing, most of them living on $1 a day. Just seeing those faces and knowing that those kids are going to go on and do so good for their own community and others, and hopefully we're going to help some of them get offshore and work. Those are the sort of things that come back to you and make your day and make your life.
Absolutely amazing. Now, I believe that you don't necessarily have to be a millionaire to give, that giving can be a smile at a stranger in a supermarket. It could be going next door and saying hello to your next door neighbor and seeing if they're okay. And it's all based, of course, on the Ubuntu philosophy.
Yeah.
You have been in Africa for a while. I know that your wife is African. Tell us a little bit about what you found with regards to Ubuntu when you came onto the continent, and how it's changed your life.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, as I say, I was down there in 2004, deployed there on a disaster relief, structural setup for corporate businesses down there with DHL in particular, a gentleman called Chris Weeks, who I'll get to meet in a couple of weeks here in Dubai after about 15 years. And he leads DHL's disaster relief, DRT. When I first landed in Africa, it just felt like home. The community spirit, the fact that people were sort of making out and helping each other with what little they had. They were overcoming incredible diversity, the spirit of Ubuntu. And you and I haven't talked about this off camera even, but I learned about Ubuntu way back there in 2004, as it happens. And just that whole spirit of giving and sharing, I think as, especially Western societies, as people realize that they've got so much, that they achieve so much, there's got to be a bigger meaning in life, surely. And a lot of people, I'm glad to say, not everybody, sadly, but most people do come to realize that once you've got enough, enough is enough. And then how much do you really need? And then what about everybody else? And it's a little bit like COVID. The Western countries, 90, 95%, we've got 97, we're nearly 100, and most countries in Africa have got 2 to 3% vaccinations. So, really, and is that going to come back to bite us? Because unless we get everybody vaccinated, it's the same thing with wealth and with sharing and community. Unless everybody is sharing, unless everybody's got a stake in the game, then really how successful are we as either people in business or as countries or as a human race?
We're going to take a small commercial break, Kim. And when we come back, we will delve a little bit more into the spirit of Ubuntu, what it means. And I'm really glad that you've touched on the impact of COVID and how we can marry that with Ubuntu being a solution to the problem. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back, everybody. This is Gertrude Mache with the Her Story TV and the Her Story podcast. My guest today, like I said in the beginning, is absolutely fascinating. We're talking today about the Ubuntu philosophy and giving. Now, you said something really pivotal about how we are handling the pandemic. My grandmother used to describe Ubuntu in this way. She would say that the human race is an organism, that we are one. And if
Yep.
you cut your finger and you start to bleed, your white blood cells will rush to that point to heal it. That's how we should be responding to each other in the world. Right now, if one person in the world is not okay, we are all not okay. And some countries are reacting and responding and being supportive of less advantaged countries, some aren't. What do you see as being a solution to this? We're literally a breath away from affecting and infecting each other.
Yeah, look, I think the narrative around the COVID has been really, well, I'd call it intriguing, but if it wasn't so dramatic and so disastrous, what's actually happened globally, that, the fact of the matter is that it's been an opportunity to really take stock of, how the world performs and how it collaborates or otherwise. And of course, what we've seen, unfortunately, as a result of a pandemic of this nature, which when you look back now, you can see it was inevitable. There's so much. It doesn't just take Bill Gates talking 20 years ago about it or 10 years ago about it to make us realize that it was inevitable and we weren't paying attention as a race or as leaders or as politicians and business people. But the fact of the matter is that we're in a situation where there's an opportunity to do good right across the spectrum of human life in various countries and cultures and as a form of education and uplifting. What's actually happened to a large extent is that the haves have had and managed to get everything that they need in terms of vaccination, and the have-nots have not. And that comes down to politics and it comes down to finances and all of the above. But it also comes down to will of leadership running different countries. The opportunity there is now to realise where the shortfalls are. The richer are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, the sick are getting sicker, and the ones who have got the vaccination are becoming better and better health. So the whole issue of Ubuntu needs to come into play here. It's a very simple principle, and that's sharing amongst others, helping those less fortunate, which I think is being both Kiwis to a large extent now with your 21 years in New Zealand. It's a bit of a Kiwi trait. We tend to give a hand to those who have fallen by the wayside, and we try and make the place a little bit better than when we saw it to begin with.
I actually think that what is happening in the world is a solution to humanity's problems. I think the universe has paused us. We are being forced to focus on family, our communities first. The earth is breathing again. Carbon emission has gone down. And it is a pandemic that is uniting humanity in a very strange way. Because when I moved to New Zealand 21 years ago, I would talk about the AIDS pandemic. I talked about my personal experience of losing hundreds of family members. I talked about the mass graves, and I could see people's eyes kind of glazing over like I was telling a fiction story.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are being united with one common enemy. Everybody is experiencing this. The level of empathy in the world is going to shift and change. And I think nobody's going to be left unscathed with what is going on with COVID-19. So those are some of the good things that are coming out of it. And the Chinese say that the word for crisis is written with two symbols. One stands for crisis, the other stands for opportunity. So there is an opportunity in this crisis for us as human beings to do things a little bit differently going forwards. So let's go back to you, Kim. If I could take you back to your younger self, and if time was an illusion and you could go back and have a conversation with that young man who was going into the world of business as an entrepreneur, and you could give him 3 nuggets of wisdom, what would you say to him?
I think, I was a serial entrepreneur. I started working doing paper runs at the age of about 7, I think, as I remember. But I had a trucking company illegally at the age of 17. I couldn't drive trucks legally till I was 18. That was back in the 70s in New Zealand. I think the three things for me would be randomly to that young man would be, reach out. We didn't have Google. I did my first university degree in the 70s without computers. I had my first job without mobile phones. I would say reach out and draw on the resources, and don't be afraid to ask people for support. That would be one thing, because like many young entrepreneurs, I made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I think those things I'm not afraid of or don't regret, because they taught me well. I made some big mistakes and nearly cost me my life on a few occasions. And another whole story. But and for me, asking, reaching out, seeking counsel, and I've carried that through in reality, that we've got a very successful executive coaching business globally. The second thing would be if you're convinced on something, don't dilly-dally on it. Just normally what we've done, or what I've done as a person, is charged headlong into things. I would say just try and build some resilience and safety around yourself as well. And that's one thing which will cause me to get myself in a little bit better shape from time to time, because I am quite headstrong. But be a bit more careful, try and check yourself. Again, that first issue comes back in, but getting some resources around you, get advice. And the third thing would be really back to the spirit of Ubuntu. And it's something we've done, but I'm pleased to remind myself of it. And that is, don't forget those around you. Bring the village with you, bring the tribe with you. Make sure that you bring people with the journey. I think that's something I've always endeavored and strive to do. And have people along learning. If you're successful and if you're doing things that are working out and that are for the betterment of others, bring other people and share that spirit. So it's not something I haven't done, but I think we should always strive to do that, to bring others. And in particular right now, the last 2 years, I was gifted. I was able to go travel overseas to many countries as a young man. I played professional rugby in the US, coached rugby, had an awesome time, relationships all around the world that are still pertaining to today. But, sort of realizing now that many youngsters don't have that opportunity is for businesses and business leaders, open up the doors to Z generation, to millennials, give them an opportunity and bring them along for that journey.
Fantastic. I've got 2 more questions for you before we go. Again, we're going to play with time, because I believe time is just an illusion. It doesn't exist. It's a construct we've put together to get to work at 9 and finish at 5. If I could take you into your future, to the 100-year-old Kim, sitting in your rocking chair, surrounded by your grandchildren and maybe great-grandchildren, and if you could have a conversation with the older you, reflecting back on your life based on how you're living your life right now, what would you say to him?
Well, it doesn't feel like it's that far away, actually, Gertrude, since you mentioned it. I feel well over 100 years of age most mornings, in actual fact, because there's a lot going on in the logistics and supply chain world. And, with God's grace, we're very, very busy everywhere in the world. But look, all jokes aside, to the point of what would I do to look back and talk to myself about guidance and things that we could have achieved. What I'd like to have achieved is continued to really, on the same theme as I just mentioned, is continued to give people who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to get involved in finding their own way in life and finding sustenance and reward for themselves and their family. And I guess this comes back to Oasis Africa, freedom from poverty through education. We are seeing massive results. 8,000 kids educated as a way to get out of the slums of Kibera, which is the 5th largest slum in the world. The reward of seeing that and the encouragement that I give others in our organisation who support what we're doing there as well, and our partners in many more in Kenya now as well, coming along for the journey, is making sure that you open the door, give people an opportunity. The other one is random acts of kindness. It is incredible that the feeling and the benefit that your mind and your body and your soul can get by just making random acts of kindness for no particular reason. You talked about the principle of reciprocity, or Ubuntu, in your parlance before. There is no greater thing for the human soul, from my perspective, than to be doing something to help others for no obvious, apparent, logical reason other than it's going to make somebody else's day. It is an incredible feeling. I think if we can all take a minute out every day and provide a random act of kindness for somebody, it will enliven our spirit forever.
Fantastic. Yeah, my grandmother used to say, when you give to someone else, you're giving to yourself. It is more for you than the other, and it's an exhilarating feeling. I totally know what that means. So my last question is there anything I should have asked you that I left out?
Geez, this is not an easy interview with you, is it? I think we need to get Trude. You really hit on the spot. But look, just before I answer that, going back to the point of giving and making things happen. Again, there's no better way of actually building up your own spirit. When people will say to me, "Oh, you guys, your team has done an incredible job in Oasis Africa and one thing and another," that's thousands of people as part of Oasis Africa. People have contributed towards that all throughout Australia, the UAE, or New Zealand, all around the place. And the bottom line there is that people say, "Oh, you've saved all these children." We never saved any children. They saved us. At times in our lives when we get confused and when we lose our way and we don't focus on the more important things of spirit and culture and giving, things like Oasis Africa will save you. In terms of the questions you should have asked me would have been, why haven't I managed to maintain my fitness better? Because I like to be a fitness freak, but the theory is not as strong as the principle, so as the actuality of it. So that would be the hard question for me. Kim, why aren't you out swimming this morning?
Thank you so much, Kim. It's been an absolute honor connecting with you and sharing your story with our community. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in. Adia, I can see you're there on Facebook saying that this is amazing. Thank you for tuning in, Adia. And anybody else who's going to listen to this interview later, please go on to oasisafrica.org, support their work. They are doing a phenomenal job in Kenya. And these are the kind of stories that we want to bring to the world: positive, reinforcing stories of change makers and thought leaders doing random acts of kindness all over the world. So thank you, Kim, for your work and your contribution to humanity. Thank you.
Thanks, Gertrude, and keep up your legendary work. You're an inspiration. I can't wait to see your next TED Talk and see your new book. And congratulations on your journey so far. I know you do a fantastic amount of work to help others less fortunate, and congratulations to you so far.
Thank you, everybody. And remember, we are still looking for speakers for our upcoming summits. Go onto our website, theherstorycircle.com/registration. We change the world through our stories, one person at a time, one woman at a time. Forgot to unmute.
As usual.
Great presentation from Kim. I tell you, when I met him, it felt like I was meeting someone I knew. His values, his mission, everything is so much in alignment with everything we're trying to do, Ruth and Selena. And welcome, Angeline. So let's just go around the room and give Kim some feedback, starting with you, Ruth.
Okay, thank you, Gertrude. Angeline, unfortunately, is at work, so she says she won't be able to participate, but she'll be watching. So welcome, Angeline. Thank you for joining us. So the work, Kim is amazing, eh? He's, I think the reason you connected with him, because he really gets the Ubuntu philosophy. He really understands what it is, you know. I think when you transcend racial lines and background, and you just operate as a human being towards another human being without looking at color or where they are, then I think that's what Ubuntu really is, because that's what he is doing. And he's just doing all this great work in Africa. Um, Thank you, Kim, on behalf of a human race. Thank you for what you are doing. And like Gertrude says, that the work that we need to pay forward,
Mm.
we need to pay our rent while we are on earth. That's so profound, what your grandmother used to say, Gertrude.
Thanks, Ruth. Selena.
Wow. It's just like when you started, it just reminded me of my mom. You when you wake up in the morning, if you don't have breakfast before 10, you'll never have anything, because you say my house is an open kitchen. Anybody who comes, she will feed. So it's like that's how I grew up, and so it's like food wasn't meant to be like. She used to say, why would you wouldn't want you to share with people? After eating, when it comes out, it's smelling anyway. So why deny people food? Let's share whatever we have. And so that's Ubuntu. And so it's amazing. And I mean, I
Yes.
heard it's about 18,000. Is it 80,000 children or 8,000?
Yeah.
8,000. It's like, wow. I mean, it's like it's a blessing. But some people, they don't want to hear about even your child, or your extended family. They don't want to hear, they don't want to know. You are now somebody else, so forget about
Mm.
it. But he just, like embraces as his own. If they are so, I mean, if there could be more Kims in the world, I
Mm.
think it could be a better world.
Yeah, we
Honestly.
need more go givers, not go
Yeah.
getters. You're
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
right. You are so right. So, our next two speakers are coming from the United States. They are
Mhm.
two lawyers who got together, decided to use all of their knowledge to help other women. Do you want to read their bios, Ruth?
Um,
Melissa and Catherine. I put the bios on Facebook.
so Melissa and Catherine. Okay. Catherine Marsh and Melissa Hopmeyer. So Catherine Marsh is the co-host of No Gray Zone podcast, No Gray Zone podcast, and a career prosecutor of 17 years. She presently serves as an assistant state's attorney in Charles County in Maryland, specializing in domestic violence, child abuse, and sexual assault. She previously served as the Assistant Chief for Special Victims and Family Violence Unit for Prince George's County, Maryland. For the past 12 years, Ms. Marsh has specialized in the field of child abuse and sexual assault cases. Mrs. Marsh also functions as a professional trainer for assistant state attorneys and staff, as well as for law enforcement community organizations, state organizations, and other legal professionals. She has served on several national and state task forces and has been asked to assist in drafting legislation, and has been called on to testify on behalf of criminal legislation before the Maryland legislature for a number of years. She has worked as an adjunct professor of criminal law for the University University of Maryland University campus from 2009 to 2019, and is a current associate professor with the National Crime Justice. So that's Catherine. Let me get to Melissa. Okay. So Miss Hopmeyer also serves as a technical trainer for law enforcement, fellow prosecutors, and the community on a variety of issues in criminal law, and is a current associate professor with the National Criminal Justice Training Center of Fox Valley Technical College. Ms. Hofmeyer has trained across the nation on sexual violence on college campuses. As part of her duties, Ms. Hofmeyer serves on several councils and boards involving domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse. She previously served as an assistant AG in the organized crime unit prosecuting prison corruption and high-ranking drug traffickers. In 2021, she was honored as the Nine Portraits of Women in the Law by George Washington University Law School. Wow. What credentials. Thank you, Gertrude. We may have the video for these two awesome lawyers. Unmute.
For having us, Gertrude. My name is Melissa Hopmeyer, and we are based out of Washington, D.C. in the USA, and I'm 37 years old. And, we host No Gray Zone podcast, as well as have a consulting business, Right Response Consulting. And Catherine and I are special victims prosecutors here in the U.S. And, we have spent our careers fighting for victims of sexual abuse and domestic violence and child abuse. And when the pandemic struck, Catherine and I had a little more time on our hands than we normally do because we're normally in court so often. And we really thought about, what could we do to prevent these crimes from happening? Because, by the time we get and meet our victims, our survivors, the bad thing has already happened. And so many of them didn't know about resources or how crimes could be prevented because we don't really do a good job in the US of educating our community about how to prevent these crimes. And so I'll let Catherine finish up the story, but that is the beginning story of how No Gray Zone and Right Response created.
Wonderful.
And I'm Catherine Marsh, and I am 44 years old. As you heard, we're based right outside of Washington, D.C. And Melissa's right. We just wanted to find a way to share a lot of the resources and information that we know and individuals who work in gender-based violence and child abuse and sexual assault seem to know, but is so often not shared in the community. And I think one of the other things is Melissa and I are both moms. I have 3 young boys. Melissa has 2 girls. And when we would talk to our friends who are also parents, so often they'd say, you're talking to your kids about what? We don't talk about that yet. And we felt it was really important to share some of the information about why you need to talk to your children at a young age about consent. And consent doesn't have to be sexual, but just the fact that children as young as 2 and 3 have body autonomy and body rights as well. And how to talk to your children about body parts. And when they get older, about sexual relationships and healthy relationships and dating and all of those things that I think sometimes as adults we start to take for granted, and we forget how important that is to talk to our children when they are young.
Wow. So how did the two of you actually come together? Did you meet in the court system? It's very, very rare to find 2 individuals who have the same passion like you do. How did you find each other?
Catherine and I joke that we share the same brain sometimes. we met in the prosecutor's office. You know, Catherine came to work in the jurisdiction that I had been working in for a while, and I think we just connected over our passion for doing this work. You know, I think people come and go as prosecutors, and there, you know, people will come into special victims to get some experience. And then there are people who it is their driving force to help survivors. And that's definitely Catherine, and I hope sometimes me too. And so I don't know if Catherine, you want to add anything about how we kind of came together?
No, I think that's it. I think I could say I knew Melissa was my partner in crime when the first thing she gave me was a pin that said "Believe Women." And I was like, that's it. That's it at its most basic. And again, we go with, we've broadened that now. We say it's not just women, it's believe survivors, and start with belief in all things. And to be able to work with somebody day in and day out who has just that passion and that drive to make sure that we are always communicating with the people in our community and beyond, something as simple as start with belief, and just to be able to have somebody to bounce ideas off of every single day is my pleasure in working with Melissa.
That is absolutely wonderful. Now, we find ourselves in the middle of this pandemic right now, and domestic violence, sexual abuse has gone up globally. What can be done from your view in the world? I'm just going to open this up so we can have this conversation. We're reading in the papers the statistics of especially domestic violence going up because people are stuck in the home with partners, with husbands, and it's turning into another pandemic of its own, correct?
It absolutely is. You know, I say there's two things that I think every single person can do every single day to help end intimate partner violence, and that's educate and advocate. I think when we look at domestic violence, so for so many years it was that happens in the home, and that's a family matter, and it's to stay behind closed doors. Yes. But what we know is that domestic violence impacts every single part of our society. You know, we know the statistics in the United States. We know that it's 12 million people every year in our country. We know that it's, Melissa, you can correct me, it's 20 people every minute who are victims of intimate partner violence. And we know that has a huge impact. They've done studies to find that days missed from work each year because of intimate partner violence is 36,000 jobs a year of just missed days. And so this isn't something that can stay behind closed doors, and it's not something that's a family matter. This impacts every single part of our society. And for me, Melissa's my person who has domestic violence inside out and backwards. And for me, I go with child abuse. And when I break down what the ACEs studies have shown for adverse childhood experiences and the stress that puts on a body through a lifetime, and it impacts heart disease, cancer, diabetes, chances for stroke, all of those can be increased from children who witness domestic violence in the household. And so if we want a healthy society, if we want a society where everybody can work and everybody has a fair chance, then we can't get there if we are not addressing domestic violence.
I couldn't say it better myself. And on top of that, when children experience intimate partner violence in their home, it perpetuates and creates generational abuse, right? Children who witness domestic violence are more likely to be in relationships that are abusive and to be abusive in relationships. And so if, you know, we want to break that cycle and end intimate partner violence, we have to start now. We have to educate our community. We have to hold offenders accountable, and we have to educate our children.
There's that that saying that hurt people hurt people. It does become generational, and where does the cycle break? So what
Absolutely.
advice would you give to a woman who's listening to us right now, who's in her home, she can't leave, she can't go anywhere, probably doesn't have any money, doesn't have any emotional strength to do something? What are the first steps in a situation like that?
I would say make a plan. You know, it takes a while. It takes, I think, on average 7 times for a victim of domestic violence to finally leave, and that is usually when they've made a plan. And that can be, you know, squirreling away the smallest amount of money every week that you know is not going to be, you know, missed or accounted for. That could be getting copies made of your children's birth certificates or important medical documents, and the same thing for you. Create what I guess we call a go bag, right? So put away a clean set of clothes for yourself, for any kids, all of your important documents in there, any money you're able to save. And then when you're safe and you've created that plan where you know, okay, I'm going to go to this hotel. I have enough money to stay there for a week. And then I'm going to, you know, call my family, and I'm going to change my phone number, and I'm going to, when you're ready, you just get that bag and you leave everything else behind, and you go, and you just don't look back. Don't answer the phone when he calls. You know, I recommend change your phone number, go somewhere where he or she doesn't know where you're going to be. You know, a lot of people will say, I'm going to go stay with my family, but unfortunately, you know, these abusers know family. So I always tell them, you need to go somewhere that you're going to be safe, that they're not going to come looking for you, because they will come looking for you. And you know, once you have a plan in place of how long you can afford to stay in a place, you know, I know we've helped victims, you know, gather enough money to make a down payment for a new apartment in a new city.
Oh,
And
wow.
months and months and months until they squirreled together enough money to put that down payment then. And then they just went, you know, once they were able to make that plan, they went, and they had to, you know, you have to kind of start a new life. But you know, that I think is my advice, is to just start small, start making a plan, get that bag together, and then when you're ready, leave, and just don't look back. And I know it's hard, and you know, so many women have, you know, they don't have financial power because that's taken from them. They don't have emotional strength because that is, you know, either physically or emotionally beaten out of them. But they should know that there are people here who can help them, and that, you know, they are strong enough to do it.
And I think that's what Melissa just ended with is also important. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I think so often survivors, because of the trapped nature of being in the home or the power and control dynamic, don't understand how many resources are available to help, or because of how they've been treated, or they've been told nobody cares or nobody would believe you, that they start to think that. And so I think it's really important to know you can and you should ask for help, and to understand that there's no shame in where you are, that there's no shame in the fact that you have been in an abusive relationship. I think the one thing that we have seen throughout the world is that anybody can end up in an abusive relationship, from somebody who is homeless to the most powerful women in the world we have seen in abusive relationships. So don't take shame onto yourself. Don't take guilt onto yourself. Be willing and able to ask for help, and then make that plan to get out, because there will be people, this network of women that you make with HerStory, there's a network of women, there's a network of services who just want to help other women get out and be safe.
That is awesome. That is just absolutely awesome. So I'm going to ask you guys a really funny little question, and it's going to lead into 2 or 3 questions. If time was an illusion, and your past, your present, your future existed in the same timeline, and you could go back to your younger selves and have a conversation with that young woman who decided to go down this career path, based on what life has taught you, what would you say to her? There's a lot of young girls looking for careers, unsure of what to do. You seem to have found a vocation that sounds to me like it's your life purpose. It's your reason for being. What would you say to her?
Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Really, I think I look back when I was younger and how much I felt I had to do this, I had to do this, or I was afraid to try and experiment down a path that it might go. That's what growing up is for, right? That's what for, high school and college, that those age brackets up until our 20s is for. Figure out what your passion is. Don't be afraid to make that mistake. Don't be afraid to try something and fail. I mean, I have said, and I know Melissa feels the same, I have learned the most from every single failure I have made. When I try something the first time and it works, I don't learn that much from it. It just worked out well, So put yourself out there, make the mistake. Don't be afraid to fail, and don't be so hard on yourself. I think we are always our own worst critics. And it's so easy to say because I'm still my own worst critic, but don't be so hard on yourself.
I love it.
Yeah, don't be so hard on yourself is definitely number one for me. And then I think the other thing I would say to my younger self is don't be afraid to take up space. I think as women, we don't take up enough space in the conversation, in the room, in life. We always want to make sure that other people are served first and that other people's needs are taken care of. And we feel like we have, this level of imposter syndrome that we don't belong in the room when we do belong in the room. And we do have, good ideas, and we deserve to be put first sometimes. And I think that it took me a lot of years, I probably still don't learn that lesson completely, Catherine would say, to know that, I'm enough and that I'm good enough to be in the room and that my voice and my opinions matter. And so I think that's probably what I would tell myself is, don't be afraid to use your voice and to take up room.
That is absolutely awesome. So now let's teleport you into the future. And you're going to have a conversation with the 100-year-old you sitting in a rocking chair, reflecting back on your life. If you could have a conversation with the future you, what would you say to her based on what you're doing with your lives right now?
I think I would say that I hope that I made a difference. That I hope that that what I did wasn't just for money or, fame or fortune. Not that any of those things have come to me, but that what the work that I did really made an impact on someone's life, and that people's lives were better because of the work that I did. And I think that that's the most important thing that you can leave as a legacy, is that people, when they think of you, they think that person is willing to help or that person helped. And that's what I would ask myself is, did you leave your mark, and did you help?
Wonderful.
I can't top that, it's I sit here and I go with, it's like Melissa said, but anytime I went camping with my dad when I was younger, his thing was, you always leave the place looking better than when you got here, right? It's always better when you leave. And I think that's the ultimate goal, is that I'm 100 and I look back and I say, you know what? I made my community better than it was before I started. And if I can say that at 100, then you know what? Life's complete, and I can say, good job, you led a great life. And that's the ultimate goal, right?
That is the ultimate goal. That is absolutely wonderful. And for me, coming from Africa, every time I go back to my village, to my community, I've just come to realize that I just have to keep showing up as me. Sometimes these young little girls need to see the role models of what they can be themselves. When I created my tourism business, I started driving the truck with all these tourists to the village. And I remember I was at the school where I support 350 kids, and there were two little 6-year-olds, and they were following me around the whole day. And I stopped to hear what they were saying. And one of them said, "Oh my gosh, she's so beautiful. And then the other one said, and she's driving the car. And I just marveled at the fact that I had shown up as the strong woman who can actually drive a vehicle, because women don't drive cars in my community. And even if I did nothing else for these children and I just kept showing up, my job was done. So as women, we are the role models for the future generation. And it really excites me to rub shoulders with women like you who are out there using the law, empowering women so they know their rights, they know where to find help. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And it's one woman at a time. For me, it's one story at a time. And I hope that there's somebody who's listening to this interview who is in the middle of the fog, and this interview has become the light at the end of your tunnel. Don't give up. The support is there. I'll be sharing all of the contact details for these two amazing women so you can get in touch and be supported and be inspired. So thank you, ladies, for gracing me with your presence today. It just lifts me up and make me do what I do every single day, to connect women to each other, to connect those who don't have the resources so they can find them. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in. Come back again tomorrow. I'll be interviewing yet another amazing woman from a different part of the world. The Her Story Circle is about empowerment. It's about collaboration. It's about empathy. It's about compassion. And we're here to make a difference in each other's lives and to lift each other up. So thank you, thank you, thank you, ladies. See you tomorrow, everybody. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes,
This
thank
is
you.
awesome. Two dynamic women who have really used all of their knowledge, their skills to just take women to the next level. Yeah, we're meeting some dynamic women through the network. What was your take, Ruth?
Again, Gertrude, that abuse, domestic abuse or GBV, is just not against Black women. And as women, our stories are the same. Kathy and Melissa's heart for what's happening. I mean, for the battered woman, and that they are using the law to just work and help these women get out of their situations, and then they teach them, prepare for it. The advice that they just gave it's advice any woman can use anyway. And it's amazing what these two women have done. They're amazing. I think they just, yeah, just dedicated to getting the women that are stuck in abusive relationships and situations out, and just getting them back to freedom. Amazing. And again, really, our stories are the same, because that they could be talking about someone in Harare, they could be talking about someone in South Africa, and we know that South Africa has very high numbers of domestic violence cases, even deaths and
Yes.
murders that happen in a relationship or in a marriage. So yes, thank you, ladies, for the work that you are doing and an amazing space that you're holding there.
Selena, what was your take?
I mean, you can tell, when they're talking that they've got compassion. They really love what they're doing. And so it's just like two angels. I mean, they met, their hearts melted, and which is really very good, because they've got an understanding of, okay, why are we here? What are we supposed to do? Let's go for it. Let's do it. And nothing is going to hold them back. So, well done, girls. I really appreciate you. That's so good. Because I mean,
Absolutely
as Ruth
wonderful.
said, it can be anywhere.
Mm.
You know, it's it's abuse. It's violence. So, oh, well done. Thank you, Gertrude.
There's a lot of work to be done to improve the condition of women's lives worldwide. So it's really inspiring to see two people dedicate their lives to it. So thank you so much, Melissa and Catherine, for gracing us with your story. Our next presenter is coming from the United States. Her name is Tiffany Jackman. She is the head of film development at HOBO Films. She's had a love for storytelling from a young age, where she started writing her own skits and plays for her classmates to perform during school assemblies. Her playwriting evolved to filmmaking, and now she is out in the world as a filmmaker. Through the years, she's produced commercial campaigns for various Fortune 500 companies while working as a film producer at Grey Worldwide and Onicon Health Group's Link 9. She has also directed and produced web series, music videos, short films, 3 feature films, and 1 TV series. She's an alumni and current screener and mentor for Multicultural Advertising Internship Program and a member of the New York Women in Film and TV. When not making films, Tiffany can be found teaching film to the next generation of filmmakers as an adjunct professor at New York City College of Technology. Tiffany loves the thrill of filmmaking and is willing to tackle any project, no matter how challenging. So, Tiffany, thank you for gracing us with your story. We'll share your video and then give you feedback as well. My apologies, my technology is not working so good. But here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story TV and the Her Story podcast. This is Gertrude Matcha here in beautiful Wellington, New Zealand. And I am graced with the presence of a very creative young woman coming to us all the way from the US. Welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your magical story with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. My name is Tiffany Jackman. I am based in the New York City area. So I live in New Jersey, but pretty much live in New York City. I am a filmmaker. I'm a writer, director, producer, and I have loved storytelling from the time I was a very, very little girl. I always tell this story that when I was little, I used to take my dolls, and not just like any little kid, every little kid plays with dolls, but I used to take my dolls and turn them into TV shows. And I'm the oldest of 4 girls, and I used to force my little sisters to watch my shows. They had theme songs and everything. So I like to come up with stories from the time I was a teeny little girl. I also used to like to write plays, and I used to write them for my classmates to perform. And the plays, people used to love the plays, but one of the frustrations I had was that the plays couldn't be consistent. You know, sometimes somebody would forget their line, or a piece of the set would fall. So I don't know, so many reasons. And then someone suggested, why don't you just film it so that when it's done right, it will stay that way forever. And so when I was 12 years old, I got my first camera, and I've been making little movies ever since. I went to NYU and went through their film program. Upon graduating, I studied film directing and producing when I was at NYU. But upon graduating, I actually got an internship at an ad agency. And so that's how I started my career, really doing commercials for these big name clients, like CoverGirl, E-Trade, Advil, Robitussin, all these huge companies. I started doing commercials for them, but on the side, I was still doing my movies because that's where my passion lied. And eventually, one of the movies got onto HBO, got onto Amazon Prime.
Forget
and
all the
we're
bad things
making the
about my
film
current
festival
relationship with the
circuit.
firm.
And so I eventually came
So
to the
I allowed
realization that
myself
I
to have
couldn't,
an
if I was
American
making
man
this much
after I divorced
success,
my
you know,
Zimbabwean
in
husband.
my downtime, my
So
vacation days,
I was
I need to
really
go
having
full
stress with
fledged and
if
just
I can say
see what
that.
I can do if I actually
So everybody,
jumped off the
American
corporate ladder
just say, oh,
and
what's
focus
wrong
on
with
my passion.
you?
And so about
Are
2 years
you
ago,
crazy?
I
Are you
decided to
this
leave my
and that?
corporate job and
But
follow my
this
film
guy
career.
happened to
And
ask me
I haven't looked
the
back since.
question that
Actually, while
made
I
me
was leaving,
realize, oh, okay.
one of my
And the
good
question
friends,
was,
Howard Bowler,
what
who
happened
ran
to you?
Hobo
No
Audio,
one had ever
I told
asked
him that,
me.
you know, I was leaving on Friday, and he asked me if I could work on a TV pilot that he had been working on. And I was like, well, sure. I mean, I'm leaving my job. Why not? And so I worked with him on this pilot called The System because I love the storyline. And that one has gained, it got distribution on Quelly TV. And then we started working on other stuff together. And I'm officially launching with Howard Hobo Films. So he already had an audio company called Hobo Audio. And now I'm the head of development at Hobo Films. We did The System, and we recently did this powerful documentary called Crawford, the Man the South Forgot. And I'm so proud of how it came out because it was an adventure pulling it together.
Wow, what an incredible journey you've been on. What I
Thank you.
love most about your story is you knew what your passion in life really was from a very early age. Some people don't get to discover it that early, but you knew what it was. You went into the corporate world, didn't feel right, and you plucked up the courage to, like you said, leap off the corporate ladder. If you were to talk to somebody right now who is trying to make a decision like that, based on what life has taught you in the last 2 years, what three nuggets of advice would you give that person to take the leap?
I would say find out what your passion is and just do it. Find out what your passion is, trust your gut, and just do it. Because when I was leaving my job, you know, and it was there were very good jobs that I worked for. So I didn't leave on any type of bad terms or anything like that. It's just that I needed to follow my passion. And as I was leaving, I was going around and telling, you know, my coworkers that, hey, you know, I'm leaving. And one of the first things they asked you is, well, where are you going? Like everybody assumed you're just gonna go to another corporate job. And when I told
Yes.
them that I was leaving, then and that I was going to just follow my passion,
Yeah.
so many of them started telling me about their passions and what they really wanted to do. And I would see this light in their eyes when they talked about, like, maybe they wanted to be a musician, maybe they wanted to paint or whatever. And then the light will go out when they say something like, oh, well, but then you know, reality set in and they had kids or whatever reason that they
Yeah.
needed to stay in this job. And it was very sad. And all I could tell them was that you can still do it. There's still time.
Yeah.
So I would say the biggest thing is just do it. And the proof of what happens when you actually just follow your passion, right, is that since I've left, I haven't had to go back and things have fallen into place. Even the
Yes.
whole thing with how it worked out with Howard Bowler, the way I knew Hobo Audio is because while I was doing my commercials, we would contract Hobo Audio to do the audio work for those commercials. So they would do the music, the sound effects, the voiceover records. So I'd been working with Howard for years, and he also would help me with my feature films as well, with my side projects. And so
Okay.
when it came time to leave, I didn't even have to ask him for anything. He just saw the passion that I'd put into my work and asked
Yes.
me to work with him. So, and so far, since I've left, I haven't had to interview or ask for anything. It's because I was following my passion, everything fell into place. But
Yeah.
so in regards, I say the first thing is just do it, trust your gut. I would say the I think I gave that second one, but the last one I would say is just because you want to make that leap doesn't mean that you should just make it without planning it. when I
Yes.
decided that I was going to leave my job, it actually, from the time I made the decision, it was actually a year's process in the
Yeah.
making for me to actually leave. I made sure that I had at least a year of savings saved up,
Yeah.
because you can't just think that your passion is going to start making you money right away, right?
Yes.
I started building my clientele, because I also have been using like what I learned in advertising to do work for small businesses. So
Yes.
I had to start building that up as well. So you have to make an exit strategy. You can't
Yeah.
just leave.
That's wonderful. Now, I know that a lot of your work is based around social justice stories,
Mhm.
and you have worked on some phenomenal pieces. Tell us a little bit about your latest venture.
Yeah. So I always ask myself, whenever I'm doing a project, before I sign on to things, I always ask myself, why does this story need to be told? Who can it help? Because I have, went to film school. So I have friends that are working on all types of projects. They're working on the Avengers movies or all these big budget things, which is cool,
Mhm.
Not knocking any of that. But I choose to work on things that I think can impact people.
Mhm.
Right. So, in regards to Crawford, the man the South forgot, this story is about a woman who journeys back to a historically racist southern town. She lives in Chicago. She journeys back to a historically racist southern town to find out what happened to her great great grandfather, because she's heard all these stories about how he was so successful, and how the family had their own business and they were so popular, but something had happened to him. So her journey is to go back and find out what happened to him, find that connection to him. And the story, her grandfather, his name was Anthony Crawford, and there's some debate whether or not he was born a slave or born right after slavery ended, but either way, he came from humble beginnings to owning over 427 acres of prime cotton land.
Wow.
And back then, right at the turn of the 20th century, owning cotton land was basically like owning gold, because that is what the country was run on at that time. So he amassed this large farm. He farmed it with his 13 children. And they grew cotton, they had animals, they grew crops. He ended up building a school. He headed a church. Like he was a pillar in the community. And as a Black man, someone who was a former slave or just born after slavery, that was a huge accomplishment. But, with that, he had pride about him. And there's something that comes with being an entrepreneur where you don't take anything from anybody because you don't have a boss, right? And so he had pride about him. And he was quoted as once saying, "The day a white man hits me is the day I die." Which just proves that he wasn't going to let anybody talk down to him. He wasn't going to let anybody hit him. And so fast forward to October 21st, 1916, he took his cotton into town to sell it, and he was underbid by a white merchant. A white merchant offered him less than what he was offering some of the other merchants, and he told that merchant, you're cheating me." He called him a cheat. And well, that was all they needed, because there were already some people who were quite jealous of him. And a mob of between 200 and 400 people beat him, stabbed him, took his body, drug it all throughout town, and then hung his body on a tree and shot it over 200 times. And if that's not horrific enough, they went to his family and told him they have 30 days to get off the land or that they would be killed as well. And so his family ended up dispersing all over the US. Some went to New York, some went to Philadelphia, some went to Chicago, where our protagonist, Doria D. Johnson, where her family ended up. And the family was split up, and till this day, they don't have any proceeds from that land. That land is owned by a paper company. And so she, being that they were dispersed, the family was kind of torn apart. She had heard these rumors about this great great grandfather that she had, and she wanted to find out more about him. And the documentary follows her as she goes back to that town and to try to get that town to recognize what happened to him.
Wow. What a tragic story.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, these are the untold stories that go unseen, unheard, unless somebody takes time to shine a light on them.
Exactly. Exactly.
Wow.
And that's what that's what, you know, us at Hobo Films, that's what we're trying to do, is shine a light on some of these stories, because there are so many stories out there. I'm tired of seeing the same story on TV all the time.
Yeah, that's so true. Do you think there could be reparations that could come out of the exposure of this kind of a story?
I mean, I would love for reparations to happen. It like, if not for Black people, Black Americans in general, but at least for this family.
Yeah.
They deserve to have something from that land. I actually went down there, and I'd been hearing about 427 acres and stuff as I was editing the film. But when I actually went down there to visit his land, I had to take a car from one end to another. And just seeing how much land that was, it was very upsetting, because I was like, wow, this family does not have access to this land and what
Anything.
it's worth. Yeah, anything. It was taken over by pretty much the people who killed him.
Gosh.
And now it's owned by a paper company.
Yeah, it's, from a distance, being a person of African descent, I have always looked on the tragedy of the African American story. We hear about these things. We are so far away from it. It wasn't until I came and lived in the US for a while that I got to experience what it is to be Black in America.
Right.
We hear the stories, but it's not the same when you're actually physically there. So I lived in Pittsburgh for a while. I lived in New Mexico, and the ignorance, even in the United States, about the history. And it's mostly because most of this history has been written out of the history books. So most kids grow up without a clue of what actually happened or what is still going on within the country. So I think it's really important that storytellers continue telling the real story and not just glossing things over. So now with the Black Lives Matter movement, I think there is an opportunity for people like you to go back and redress the past.
Yes.
Somebody said to me the other day, I'm really sad with what's going on in the United States. And I think it's actually perfect. The previous regime, the Trump legacy, was a catalyst for change. People were under the impression that the civil rights movement had solved the issues with race relations issues in the United States, and it wasn't true. And it's like somebody had slapped a Band-Aid over a septic sore and said, everything is fine. We've dealt with it. And this wound has been festering under the surface. And Donald Trump came up and pulled off the Band-Aid and exposed what's really there. And now it's time for Americans to heal, to go back into those wounds and address them. When you watch a man being murdered by a policeman on screen, we've seen so many of these deaths, and nobody's held accountable to it. The policemen walk off scot-free. The police are supposed to be the protectors of a community, of a society, and that's not the case in the US.
No, not at all. It's because in the US, the police started off as the slave patrols. So how could they be a protector of Black people if their origins are in oppressing Black people? That's a whole nother conversation. But
it's another conversation, yeah.
Yeah.
And the prison system, from what I see, is just another form of slavery.
Yes.
I used to watch, American Westerns. So I'm from Zimbabwe originally, and the bounty hunters and all of that. it's just the same thing. They have a certain quota. They have to catch enough people to keep the prisons going. I mean, nowhere else in the world is the prison system privatized. I mean, if you privatize a prison system, you need people in the prison so they can make money. It's such a bizarre thing to watch from a distance, and yet it's considered very normal in the United States. It's like, I don't get it. I really.
Yeah, they're just so used to it that they don't know any other way, you know. But that's, like I said, that's a whole nother discussion. The prison system should not be privatized. I don't think that the police should be making money. I'm sorry, not the police shouldn't be making money. The police system should not be a way of making money for the government. They should not be getting money for for the number of people that they lock up. They shouldn't even be getting money for the number of parking tickets they write. They should literally be there to protect and to serve. But because there's so much tied, they make so much money off of what the police officers do. It harms the community at the end of the day. It makes them stop people for stupid reasons, you know? It's crazy. That I think the whole system needs to be revamped.
Yeah. Well, I really thank you for coming and shining a light on a very important issue in the United States. Thank you for the work that you do in telling these stories, the untold stories that people never get to hear about. And I hope that through your work, things will change. I know that we can change the world one story at a time, one person at a time, and that's basically what you're working on as well.
Thank you so much. And thank you for giving me the time and the platform to talk about these stories. I really appreciate it.
It is an absolute pleasure. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. Our platform is trying to connect, uplift, inspire women, people all over the world, one story at a time, one day at a time. Sometimes you'll come onto this platform and you'll hear a story that will shock you. And I know for a lot of people in the US listening right now, you might not have known about these kind of stories and you've lived there your whole life. So I hope you have taken this particular story with empathy, putting yourself in the shoes of this family, the Crawford family, what they went through, what they lost, what their great-grandfather had created as a legacy for his family that is just completely gone. How would you feel if it was you? I think when we infuse empathy in our listening, we can change the world. So thank you again. I'll be back again tomorrow with yet another amazing story. This is Gertrude Matcha here in beautiful Wellington, New Zealand. Have a fantastic day wherever you are in the world. Bye for now. Thank you, Tiffany.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. I always marvel when I go back and rewatch these videos. Although I was there interviewing the person, one of the biggest things that I have found is there's so many stories that are untold. In the United States, a lot of people of African descent, African American people, have been marginalized because of the system. Land that was taken off them. Their families were not given reparations for that confiscated land. And so people are at a disadvantage their whole lives. And people wonder why they're not moving ahead and succeeding. But the starting point for most people of color is not the same. So thank you, Tiffany, for sharing that amazing story. It's always intriguing to find these kind of stories that really shine a light on the reality of most people's lives. So our next speaker is Leanne Kabat. I will just share her bio with you. Leanne is the author of the 5 Seasons of Connection collection. Her books take us right into those critical minute by minute interactions where we either draw closer together or pull further apart. When we understand our reasons, we can transform our relationships from conflicted to connected by confidently moving out of the cold, dark, stormy winters towards love, happiness, and sunny summer days. Her first book helps parents connect on a deeper level with their children. Her second book goes into the most profound adult relationship we have, guiding couples out of winter towards their deepest love and truest connection. And her third book helps entrepreneurs overcome fears of failure, success, and everything in between to build a business on their brilliance. Leanne developed the 5 Seasons framework as a result of a medical condition in 2006 that gave her 5 years to live, challenging her to truly live the life that she loved. 15 years later, she is managing her medical condition with grace and acceptance, and she happily raises 3 teens and is excited to visit her 58th country when it's safe again to do so. So, Leanne, thank you for sharing your story. It's always fascinating to see somebody who has defied all the odds, somebody who was told that she is terminally ill. And I think it is just your spirit and your essence that has kept you going and brought you to this point. So thank you for sharing your story with us. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the HerStory TV and the HerStory podcast. This is Gertrude Matcha here in beautiful Wellington, New Zealand. Today, I'm graced with the presence of yet another fascinating lady coming to us from the US. Welcome to our platform. Welcome to the tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Leanne Cabot, and I am living in Seattle, which is on the west coast of the US. I'm originally a Toronto girl, so I'm Canadian through and through. And, you know, I have an interesting story that might help some people in your audience. So I just wanted to share that today. I hope that's okay. I moved to the US 14 and a half years ago. My husband was transferred for his job. I had 2 small children and I was pregnant with baby number 3. And my husband needed to travel for work. So I was alone with the babies. And we went to bed one night. It was very late when I woke up to go to the bathroom, as pregnant women do. I was 5 months pregnant at the time. And immediately when I stood up, I collapsed on the floor. And I fell on my baby, on my belly, and I was frozen for 5 hours. I couldn't move. I couldn't cry. I couldn't get up. I couldn't do anything. And so I lay there feeling all the feelings, right? I begged the universe to let me move. I was angry that the universe, was keeping me on the floor. I was terrified my children would wake up and see me, frozen on the floor beside them. And all through it, I worried about the baby in my belly, right? Like what was going on here in my body? My brain wasn't working. What was it doing to the baby? At about 7 a.m, I was able to move. I had this huge, hot flooding of temperature through my body. Everything started to spin, but I could get up. So I got up, I got dressed, I woke up my 2 toddlers, put them in the van, and I found the nearest hospital and I drove there because we had just moved to this new city. I didn't even know the hospital, where the hospital was located.
Wherever you are in the world.
And when we got there, it set off this journey of examining what had happened to me and what was continuing to happen. The baby was born in July and he was healthy, thank God. But I continued to get sicker. And in November of that year, which was 8 months later, they called me back into the hospital and they said they didn't know what I had, but they knew it was going to kill me. And they gave me 5 years to live. So at that time, I had a 4-month-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old baby, and I could not imagine dying and leaving these children with no mom. And for the first few years, I was busy dying. I was taking thousands of pictures. I was writing them love notes. I was organizing their rooms and doing all the things I wished I could do for them. And then one day, somebody came to visit, and she just really opened my eyes. She said, you know, when you're not here, Leanne, don't worry. I'll step in. I'll raise the kids. And I thought, wait, they're my children. These are my children. I want to raise them. I shouldn't have to die. I should live. And so I decided to fight for my life. And I invested in self-care. I slept when I was tired. I ate very healthy food. I decided I was not going to cook and clean and run around like a crazy person. I was going to be with my children, and I was going to get healthy. And that's all I focused on. And I am now at 15 years past the first brain crash. I have 3 teenagers who I love so very much. And every day has been an absolute honor living this life, knowing I still have this brain disease, and choosing every day, how do I want to show up? How do I want to be in this life? What are the dreams that I want to pursue? And what are the things I can do right now to make those dreams come true? Because tomorrow isn't promised. 10 years isn't promised, but I have today. And so it's changed my life and my philosophy completely.
Wow, what an amazing story. That's just incredible what happens when we make a choice what direction our lives can take.
Right.
So if you were to go back to that younger woman who was given this diagnosis, started to die because you were told you were going to die, and give her advice, let's say there's somebody who's tuned in and listening right now,
Mm-hmm.
what 3 pieces of advice would you give her? What would you have wanted somebody to say to you at that moment in time?
I would want someone to have said to me, you are brave. You have gotten through everything you've ever been faced with in your life, and you have come out stronger and fiercer and more powerful than you ever thought you could be. Find her. Find her inside of you. Find the fighter inside of you. Don't give up. You know, I wasted 3 years just thinking, is today the day I die? Is today the day that the headache takes me down? Is it today? I wasted so much time being afraid, and I am a brave fighter, and I had forgotten that. So that would be the very first thing. The second thing I would say to that woman, to myself and anyone else, is focus on what matters. You know, driving a fancy car, having the perfect roses, wearing the best clothes, none of that matters. You know, what matters is what matters to you. That's what matters. So if it's your children, if it's your legacy, if it's financial freedom for your parents or your community, that's what you focus on. Don't let somebody else determine your value in life. And then I'd say the third thing that I would think of is your life, however deep, however long, however it is here for you, right? So how can you use your life to grow? And how can you use your life to uncover who you really are so you can put that into the world while you can? You know, we all have gifts. And if we're so busy denying our truth or hiding who we really are, we aren't really living, right? We're just we're just existing under this mask of things. So I would really just say, put down those layers of, what you think it should be and who you think you should be, and say, this is me. I am here. I want to find out my potential. What does that look like in everything I do? How can I reach my best potential? And then let me be brave to chase that.
Oh, wow. What I love about your story is you have really harnessed every challenge, everything you've gone through. You're now helping other people to overcome these challenges, to reframe how you take in that negative information and make decisions on how to take control of your own life. Let's talk a little bit about how you're helping people right now.
Yeah, so through this process, as you can imagine, I faced many dark nights of the soul, right? Like many nights that I just did not think I was going to make it through okay. And I decided this wasn't a way to live. So I happen to live in a part of the country and a part of the world where we have 4 seasons. And I started noticing the seasons a little bit more intentionally. And winter was a time of cold, harsh, bitter winds, right? Spring was a time where new plants were growing and we could plant new things, the things we wanted to nurture. And summer is the best it could be. Like, we were happy in summer when it's shining and warm and everyone was laughing. And fall is a signal that winter is on its way and things are starting to shut down again. And I noticed that was my emotional state, right? When I was in winter, I was fighting with my kids. I was angry at God. I was unhappy with the universe, right? I was really miserable. So what could I plant? How could I spring clean my life to take out the things that I didn't want and put more of the things I did want to get to summer, right? Like, that was the idea. And I felt like the seasons were missing something. So I created the 5th season, which I call the crossroads. And at the crossroads, you stand there and you get to choose in this moment. Will I go back to winter? Will I fight? Will I be defensive? Will I attack other people or be angry at the world? Or can I choose differently? Can I choose forgiveness? Can I choose compassion? Can I choose love? Right? I get to choose what the outcome of everything is. So if it's fighting with my kids, or, a client tells me that I didn't do a good job, or any of the hundreds of things we experience in our life, to choose the outcome based on how I feel. And I always want to choose summer, right? So even if that means I bite my tongue, even if that means I forgive someone who really might not even deserve it or doesn't even care, I choose summer for me, because at every moment, that's where I want to be. So I live in this space of conscious, intentional choice to see the world the way I want to see the world, which is really a place filled with love and people who are hurting. So how can I support them through their hurt?
Wow. I do like to choose summer. Right now, a lot of people are suffering, Leanne.
Yeah.
COVID has impacted us in ways that, humanity will never be the same again. I lost my father in 2018. And then during COVID, on the 30th of March, I lost my mother-in-law in Poland. 3 weeks later, my mother died in Zimbabwe. So in a space of like 2-3 years, so much sadness and tragedy and loss.
Yes.
And I would say that this has been my winter season. I even lost my first grandchild as well. My daughter got pregnant and had a miscarriage soon after, and we had already started to celebrate. I started knitting little jerseys and booties, and I remember my mom coming to me in a dream. I was so depressed last year. And in this dream, I was brushing my teeth and I spat and looked up into the mirror, and she was in the mirror looking back at me. And she said to me, she was laughing, a really funny way, because the day of her funeral, I was so depressed. I shaved off all my hair. I was completely bald. And she comes to me in this dream, and I look like my mom now more than ever because my hair was short at the time. And she's in the mirror just laughing hysterically, laughing at me, but very joyful and lighthearted. And she said, you see, that's why I made you look like me. So that you can always remember, I haven't gone anywhere. I am in you. I am with you. You need to wake up, baby. You need to live. So long as you're this side of the grave, stopping is not an option. And that got me up. And I just took back control and chose summer, like you said. And it started in small ways. Yeah. It started with my just opening my eyes in the morning and being grateful that I could see.
Yes.
It started with my standing in the shower and feeling the water on my body and being grateful I could stand in the shower. I had clean drinking water. It started with very small acts of gratitude.
Totally.
And then summer came, and this is a year later. I celebrate my mother's life every single day. And there's a lot of people hurting right now, needing these kind of tools to get through a very difficult time. So if I can take you into your future as the last question for this interview, and we could imagine that time was an illusion, and you're now 120, because you're going to live to 120 with your attitude and science. I can see you sitting in a rocking chair, looking at your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. If you could have a conversation with the older you, based on how you have lived life, what would you say to her?
I would say to her, I would say thank you. I would say thank you for making the choices to choose you. I would say thank you for putting you first when you were hurting. And it's easy to serve other people. It's easy to get lost in, I want to be a good mom. I want to be a good wife. I want to be a good person in my church. It's harder to stand up for yourself. It's harder to say, I'm worth it. I deserve sleep, or I deserve rest, or I deserve peace. I deserve forgiveness, or I deserve anything that I need to make it through this life. I would thank myself for choosing me in these really hard times, because you're right. There are so many things to be grateful for, even when we're at the bottom of the darkest winter storm. And we can't actually stop winter from coming.
No.
After the loss of your father, you didn't see that your mother-in-law and your mother would both be, passing on. You thought, oh my gosh, winter is here, and you were working through it, and winter came again, right? With COVID, we are seeing it over and over. Winter keeps coming, but we have to keep choosing. What is the path to summer? Is that gratitude today? Yes, it is, right? What can I be grateful for? Is it love? That might mean playing on the floor with your child. That might be writing a letter to somebody who you miss. That might be making a phone call or giving somebody a word of encouragement, right? What is it today that can be the spring cleaning to bring you back to summer? It's a journey. Like, there is no end to the weather. Doesn't stop. Winter doesn't stop, but summer doesn't stop either.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the crossroads, is keep choosing summer. Keep choosing your